All right, so when you're styling a web page, CSS is always the way to go. You should always use an external CSS file. You get a ton of reuse out of it. You can attach that same file to all the pages in your website. You can use classes, so you can reuse styles on different elements. For this example page, I've just created a style up inside the head of this CSS file. I've created two classes. Inside the head of the HTML file. I've created two classes, one called sum, one called other. And I've put the class sum on the main element, and I've put the class other on the paragraph inside the footer. So other gives us purple and large text, and main gives us the khaki background with bold text throughout, and a sans serif font. All right, so what we want to do here is we're going to be using JavaScript to update those styles. Now, CSS is the way you should go to create all of your default styling. You can even do animations and hovering effects and so on with CSS. But there's going to be times where you need to update parts of your page. You want to remove one property, add one property, update the class name, toggle back and forth between two different class names. It's just a very useful thing to be able to do. So that's what we're going to look at in JavaScript here. There's a property called className. Now, className allows you direct access to the class property on any HTML element. Whatever you set as the string will entirely replace what's inside of here. So we could say main, which is my targeting of the ID main, which is this element here, dot class name equals, and then inside the quotation marks, I can put the class other, and that would entirely replace sum with the other class. Or if you had multiple classes, you can specify them that way. There we've got sum and other both being applied here. So that's class name. Simple enough to do. I'm going to take out the other just because it's going to be a little bit large for us to see everything if I keep everything with that large font. Now, classList allows you to take the element. So here, I'll put it there. So that won't actually affect the page. We'll still get our sum being applied, and then the imaginary ABC class is also being applied here. ClassList allows you to look at these individual pieces. So let's say down in the footer here, we have the class other right now, and I wanted to add the class sum without getting rid of other. Or let's say I didn't know what other classes were inside the footer paragraph, and I wanted to add the class sum to it. So we can say foot.classList.add, and inside here we pass in the string for the class name we want to add, sum. There we are. The sum and other are both being applied to the paragraph in the footer. Now, you can call this again and again and again and again. It's not going to make a difference. The browser will check to see, does this class already exist there? If it does, then I won't bother adding it again. So, sum has been added. There's also the class list remove, which, as you would imagine, just removes one class. There we go. So now we only have the class sum here. The class other has been removed. And then the final one for class list is toggle. Now this one's usually tied to an event. So if you click on something or you mouse over something, you want to call this method. So class list dot toggle, and then you pass in the name of the class that you want to remove if it's there, add if it's not. There, we've put it back. So we removed it, and then toggle, called once, we'll add it back in. If we call it twice, it adds, then removes. So it's been removed. So you can imagine, if you had this inside of a function, you could call the function anytime and remove or add. Toggle the class, toggle the appearance of the class. Okay, so that's class name and class list. Now, class name, I just want to reiterate this. It's for the property class, the attribute class. We can't use the word class in here because class is a reserved word that's used for something else in JavaScript. So class name was the property that they had to pick. Most of the time, ID, role, we can come in here and say main.id equals, and then set the ID. We can go main.title equals. We can do things like that. But for a class, you have to use class name. So this is a shorthand version of the set attribute or get attribute. You can do this. All right, so that's class name and the class list properties. Style, if you want to deal with one single property, so say, foot.style, we can then specify a single property that we want to work with. So let's say the background color. There we go. Background color is set to salmon. Now you'll notice in CSS, this is written all lowercase with a hyphen. All of the JavaScript equivalents of these properties are written with camel case. So the first letter of the second word, third word, and so on are all capitalized. Lowercase, and then capitalize the first letter of the second word. Put them together with no hyphen. That is the JavaScript property. So style.property name, or if you wanted to set 2 or 3 things, you could actually come in here and say CSS text equals, and then pass in a string, which would be the same as what you'd write inside of the CSS. So over here, font family sans serif. That is something that's valid for the CSS text. And then you can put in another property. Font stretch, letter spacing, whatever property you want to use. So it's basically everything that you would put inside of a CSS style. So everything that would come inside the curly braces, that's what the CSS text would be. So font family sans serif has applied the letter spacing 5 pixels, so there's an extra 5 pixels between each of these letters here, which is spacing out the word. All right, that's the CSS text, class list, class name. Those are the main ways that you will be manipulating. There's also, and I encourage you to take a look at this a little bit later, there is a window.getComputedStyle method, and you can pass in an element to that. So let's say the UL. You want to find out what style properties are being applied to this UL. So the rendered version of this UL on the page, what are the properties being applied to here? So console.log, and we're going to get our style variable inside of it, the CSS text property. So I want to bring up my console here. There we go. This is the CSS text that's being applied to the UL. So you can see there's a ton of default properties. But if you ever want to find out which things are being applied to any element on the page, you can look at the CSS text and then work with that as a string, search for certain things inside of it. Or if you wanted to get a list of the properties, 258. There we go. We can treat this as if it were an array. There are 258 things inside of here. So console.log, let's say style.item. This is how we retrieve them. Number 200. And yeah, we'll just write that out, see what it gives us. There we go. WebKit text emphasis position. That is property number 200 out of that entire list. If you wanted to find a specific item, another way we can do it is style, instead of .item, if we don't know the one, we can say get property value for color. There we go. This is the color black. It's the RGB value for all the text in the UL. So there's get property value, there's remove property, there's set property, a whole bunch of stuff. So I encourage you, when you have time, to take a look at get computed style. You won't use it that often, but when you do need it, it'll be very, very valuable to you to be able to target things, find out whether or not things have been styled in a certain way. And that's it. That's how you would manipulate any style on the page with JavaScript.